Yesterday, Donald Trump announced that the US and the UK had finally reached an agreement on a trade deal that he claimed was only made possible because of Brexit.
You know, I think you made the right decision years ago. A big part of that decision was always that you'd be able to make a deal with the United States, and they were unable to do that. But now they made it, and it's a tremendous, it's very important. That was always a big part of your decision on Brexit.
No doubt that will have made Keir Starmer, one of the country's biggest Remainers, a little bit uncomfortable. Unfortunately for both of them, the news was very quickly overshadowed by the Vatican selecting a new pope, an American no less. I guess the Vatican really didn't want to pay tariffs. Anyway, Keir Starmer wants you to think that this is a really good trade deal for Britain. And is it? Well, yes and no. We're better off than we were last week, but we're worse off than we were, say, a year ago. However, on balance, I will say that I think this is a good thing. There are, of course, winners and losers, but when you compare our current trading relationship with America, it's a lot better than most other countries. So let's start with the things that are just obviously good. The US steel tariffs on UK imports have gone from 25% to 0%. And that is really significant because our steel industry is in complete decline. In fact, the Chinese company Jingye, who own British Steel, as crazy as that sounds, well, they were talking about closing the blast furnaces down for good and laying all of the workers off. It looks like that might actually get nationalised in the near future, and having some kind of agreement where we can ship our steel over to America, well, that will be helpful. Apparently this is only going to be worth about £700 million. But again, it's really important that we protect this industry. If we allow all of our steel production to be undercut by cheap Chinese steel, well, then we become entirely dependent on other countries to build just about anything. So yes, this is very welcome. This is a very good outcome from this deal. Next up is cars. Now, you may have heard Donald Trump talking about wanting to bring car manufacturing back to the United States. And in order to do that, or to encourage it, he placed 27.5% tariffs on all imports to the US for cars. That was absolutely devastating to manufacturers like Jaguar Land Rover and Aston Martin. In fact, so much so that they simply refused to export those vehicles until this issue was sorted.
Look at this. £9 billion of British car exports to the United States every year, by far the single country largest trading partner. Look, more than double China and the bigger EU nations. 1 in 4 of every cars that's sold out of the UK every year goes to America. So 25% tariffs could be critical for that industry.
As you heard there, about a quarter of the cars that we export go to the United States. So that is a big number. It's a huge market for us. And 27% tariffs would have been absolutely devastating. But now, as a result of this trade deal, the tariffs will drop to 10% for the first 100,000 cars that a company exports to the United States. So this is some kind of win, and Keir Starmer was very keen to play on it. Straight after this announcement, he went to the Jaguar Land Rover factory to deliver a press conference.
Just a few moments ago, I spoke to President Trump, the President of the United States, and I'm really pleased to announce to you, and I wanted to come to you to announce that we've agreed the basis of a historic economic prosperity deal.
But let's not get carried away with this like it's some roaring success, regardless of what Keir Starmer says. Sure, 10% tariffs are better than 27%, but before all of this tariff business, it was 2.5%. So whilst Jaguar Land Rover and Aston Martin are better off today than they were yesterday, they're worse off than they were, say, 6 months ago. And that 100,000 limit, well, that's really important. If a company exports more than 100,000 vehicles to the United States, then the tariffs go back to 27%. Now, Aston Martin, they're not going to export anywhere near that number of cars because they're very expensive and not many people can afford them. But Jaguar Land Rover, they do. Last year, they exported 101,000 vehicles to the United States. So what America has basically said is, you can stay, but you can't grow. You can stay at the exact level you're at right now, but you're not allowed to grow. You're not allowed to start selling more and more cars in the United States. You're not allowed to be real competition against our vehicles. Interesting. So those are the good bits. Those are the parts that Keir Starmer wants you to hear about when people are discussing this deal. But there's more to it than that. You see, America has wanted to export its agricultural products for a very long time, particularly beef and chicken. But we simply don't take any of it.
By far the biggest, more than £300 million of fruit and vegetables. If you go right down to the bottom and look at meat, £5.7 million. It's a tiny market.
And it isn't just us, by the way, it's also the Europeans. They don't want American meat products. Why? Well, because these meat products are often treated with chemicals and hormones that violate our food standards. So even if you wanted to sell them in these markets, you wouldn't be allowed to by law. Now, let's suppose that there's some beef that America wants to sell to the UK and it does actually meet our food standards. It hasn't been treated in any of those ways. Well, there's also a 12% tariff, which just makes it economically not viable to do so. But something has clearly changed because in the White House, they're getting very excited for American farmers.
American beef really quickly, and it can't be understated. I'm Brooke Rollins, by the way, how important this deal is and what this means to American farmers and ranchers. Specific to the beef, this is going to exponentially increase our beef exports. And to be very clear, American beef is the safest, the best quality, and the crown jewel of American agriculture for the world.
So is the UK about to be flooded with chlorinated chicken and hormone-filled beef? Well, if you trust the government, then the answer is no. They've come out and made clear that there will be no changes to our food standards, which is a byword for saying, no, we're not going to have chlorinated chicken and we're not going to have hormone-filled beef. All of the products that are imported into the UK from America will have to meet the same standards as British farmers currently do. Now, that is a good thing, on the assumption that you trust the government, which of course we all do. Let's assume for the moment that the food standards across British beef and American beef will remain exactly the same. Well, as a British cattle farmer, you might still be a little bit nervous about this, and that's because you don't want all of this added competition that's now coming into your backyard. And I can understand those fears, but I think they're actually a little bit misplaced. And I say that because according to Politico, the amount of American beef that can be exported into the UK under this agreement is limited to 13,000 tonnes. Now, 13,000 tonnes of beef to you and to me might sound like an awful lot, but we consume over 1 million tonnes of beef in the UK every single year. So this represents just over 1% of the market. And I don't think 13,000 tonnes of additional beef from America that meets the same food standards we currently have is going to somehow cripple the market and push British farmers out of business. I just don't see that as being plausible. Not only that, this deal is actually reciprocal. So British farmers can, if they choose to, export British beef or British chicken or whatever it might be over to America. And if, for example, some very wealthy Americans don't want to eat hormone beef or chlorinated chicken, well, they now have a choice. They can buy British. So this might actually work out to be not too terrible, but let's wait and see. Another thing that might be a little bit scary for farmers is ethanol, because ethanol, of course, is made from wheat. So at its root, it comes from the farmers. Now, previously, the tariffs on importing American ethanol into the UK were 19%. But as part of this deal, it's been dropped to 0%. And actually, that kind of surprises me because as part of the process of producing ethanol, the government takes an enormous amount in taxes. So I'm kind of surprised to see them undercut their own tax take. And I'll be honest, I don't know how this is going to affect farmers or how it's going to affect the government's tax income from ethanol. We'll just have to sort of wait and see what comes out of that. Almost as interesting as what's in the deal is what wasn't in the deal. You see, just 1 week ago, Donald Trump hinted that he might put a 100% global tariff on movies made outside of the US. And it turns out, I only learned this yesterday, that the British film industry is worth more to our economy than exporting vehicles. I had no idea that that was true, but clearly a 100% tariff would be absolutely devastating to that industry. So let's hope that that doesn't happen. Will it happen? I don't know. He's just hinted at it. He hasn't actually announced it. If it does happen, maybe there's some kind of carve out that we as Britain can get because, you know, we've been working with them on trade, special relationship, all of that good stuff. Let's hope. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, this trade deal is not actually all that bad for Britain. Don't listen to all the doomers. But it's not because Keir Starmer has pulled a blinder. No, he's just gotten exceptionally lucky. And I'll tell you how. First of all, Donald Trump feels a personal connection to the UK. His mother was Scottish, he likes our traditions, he loves the royal family. He's actually invested a lot of money in this country. I don't think he would like to see it crumble. So that's great. Secondly, Brexit. Keir Starmer vehemently opposed to Brexit. But if we didn't have Brexit, there is no way that we could have negotiated this deal. That's just indisputably true. It doesn't matter if you're a Remainer, a Rejoiner, a Brexiteer. You cannot deny the fact that we would not have been able to negotiate a unilateral trade deal with America if we were still part of the European Union. No other European country has done that for good reason. And lastly, Donald Trump kind of needs a win, okay? I think he's doing a pretty good job over in America, but specifically on his trade sort of ideas, the plan was put all of these tariffs out and then have countries coming to you and getting trade deals that are worse than they were before, better for America, but hopefully still not too terrible. But as of yet, despite saying that he's got hundreds of countries lined up, waiting to do trade deals with America, he hasn't actually managed to pull one off yet. So I think Donald Trump wanted a quick win. He wanted to show the rest of the world and the American people that my strategy, my economic strategy, is working. These countries are lining up, they want to do trade deals. It won't be as good as the deal they had before, but it will be something. And yet that hadn't happened. The Japanese delegation had recently been at the White House, but they left empty-handed. They couldn't come to an agreement. So Donald Trump wanted to have one of these deals, at least one, as quickly as possible to kind of put pressure on other countries. No other country wants to be the last country to negotiate with America and get a trade deal, right? Being the first is probably going to be the best situation. So I think Keir Starmer's got quite lucky. I don't think Donald Trump is feeling that much pressure, but maybe a little bit of internal pressure to sort of prove to the American people that the whole tariffs plan is actually working. And so we've been able to capitalise on that a little bit. Now, I will say, whilst I call this a trade deal and everyone is calling this a trade deal, it's not a full and sort of comprehensive trade deal. Actually, that's the kind of thing that Congress would have to sign off on, and that takes a really long time to do. So if a different American president came in, they could actually tear all of this up because it's technically it's not going to be American law. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video, learned a little bit about the US-UK trade deal, tariff situation, whatever you want to call it. Please do leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in a future video. And I'm not going to ask you to try and work out where I am. I am still in France, but I don't think you've got a lot to go on. It wouldn't be very fair. So, in fact, I don't even know where I am. Anyway, I'll see you in a future video, and yeah, till the next one.